Hi, I'm Kathryn Kure, Chapter Lead of Creative Commons South Africa and consultant. This presentation focuses upon work undertaken in K-12 science education in South Africa for STEAM Foundation, primarily supported by Siemens Stiftung, but also by BMZ, Creative Commons Sabia, and Dormac. Then we also have in this presentation on how to catalyze open education in South African schools, Nomvuyo Mgoqi, principal of Kulisani Child Development Academy in Langa, Cape Town, who has been the chief materials developer for STEAM Foundation over many years. And Nomvuyo is in the room, but I see that she is struggling to come in. There we are. Sorry, let me just go back to over here. And she was the chief developer for STEAM Foundation and Learning and Teaching support materials for continuing professional teacher development, having worked for UCT Schools Development Unit. Somebody else who couldn't make it is Andrew Rens. He's stuck in traffic, and he is legal scholar and policy expert who looks at law and technology, who completed his doctorate at Duke Law School at Duke University in North Carolina, where he wrote about the use of Creative Commons licenses for open education materials. And our final person is Waldek-Thill, founder of Science Week, who did her research for her MSc in development management on the topic, can the provision of open educational resources through specific amendments to the Copyright Bill promote equitable education in South Africa? And if Anne and Nomvuyo can put on their videos so long, it'll be just nice for everybody to see who you are. So it's good to see you. Thank you so much. Our context: South Africa suffers from an historical lack of open educational resources aligned to the curriculum in K-12 education within an educational context of deep poverty, inequality, unemployment, crowded classrooms, intermittent electricity, and expensive internet data. We will focus on what is required to enable open learning, specifically within continuing professional teacher development, using a human-centered design thinking approach. We will reflect on how learning has to be sensitive to context in both offline and online environments. Be data and Inklight must support teachers who may lack both content knowledge and pedagogical skills, especially in out-of-subject teaching, indicate that a scaffolded approach is required, as well as look at the risks of using AI in such a context. We will then address the policy and legislative changes required to enable more OER, learning and teaching support materials, or LTSM, and advocate for the amendment of an outdated copyright law and changes to tax donation laws, which will be catalytic in enabling the production of OER. Our key takeaways: we hope you will gain insight into the challenges, reflect with us on what needs to be done to support it, think about what specific catalytic actions that, despite seeming to be small, could transform an educational landscape at no further cost to the fiscus, and hope this will inspire you to seek similar legislative changes in your own teaching and learning contexts. Finally, we will very briefly consider the issue of inequality in the implementation of generative AI in countries with a small number of mother tongue texts. The triple challenge, as you can see from this, is that of deep poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Classrooms are overcrowded. Learners in classes range from 40 to 60 at a time. Infrastructure is poor, and they are inadequately resourced, including no to intermittent electricity and problems with internet access, coupled with high data costs. Teaching and learning resources, including textbooks, are inadequate, and the lack of educational materials in general is compounded by the fact that they are high in cost and almost invariably copyrighted. South Africa also has a shortage of qualified teachers, especially in mathematics and foundation phase languages, which leads to significant out-of-field teaching. This lack of suitably qualified teachers is compounded by the fact that while curricula internationally and in South Africa is developed for grades 7, 8, and 9, which is meant to be the start of the specialist phase, an enduring feature of South Africa lies in the racially based spatial geography of the built environment, and grade 7 teachers are found within primary and not secondary schools, and are generalists teaching all subjects as opposed to the specialists that the curriculum at this stage requires. The majority of teachers, 80%, lack the content knowledge and pedagogical skills to teach the subjects they are currently teaching. For example, 79% of grade 6 mathematics teachers cannot get 60% on a grade 6 or 7 level maths test, and this was Paul Spall. So, our interventions. The work of STEAM Foundation was informed by evaluations undertaken into the effectiveness and value of the experimenter program of Siemens-Stiftung, and it was undertaken by the UCT Western Cape and the UCT Schools Development Unit, which provided hands-on experience in scientific experiments and which was piloted in 6 provinces of South Africa over a 5-year period. The UCT Schools Development Unit recommended that given teachers limited experience in conducting hands-on practical work, scaffolded interventions are required to assist teachers to develop the knowledge and skills required to facilitate open or minimally guided scientific inquiry using a cooperative learning approach. The research was also clear that teachers are more likely to change their instructional strategies when there are clear links made between the materials and their daily teaching experience, curriculum standards, and assessments. The design approach therefore sought to meet teachers' needs for activities that are aligned to the curriculum. We used a human-centered design thinking approach, and this is literally a picture of where one of our schools is situated. We knew that if the materials could meet those of Mrs. Dlamini, whose no-fee paying Quintile 5 school is deep in the rural KwaXimba Valley in a tribal authority area with classes of 47 students and upwards, working out of a mix of brick and mortar and prefabricated buildings with intermittent electricity, poor Wi-Fi signal, a single and very old desktop computer, a black and white photocopy machine, and an entry-level smartphone whose data costs are extremely high, then they would undoubtedly be fit for purpose in more resourced contexts too. This was all about scaffolded learning. The approach taken was therefore supportive, with scaffolded learning that did not presume prior content knowledge and which systematically takes teachers through the experimental requirements determined by CAPS through generating learner worksheets they were able to work through themselves, and for which model answers were also provided to enable success. Of particular relevance was the pedagogical practices around cooperative learning that were instituted by the expert trainers, including Nomvuyo, who is here in the room with us, and which could readily be adapted to the local context. Cooperative learning practices were then embedded as an add-in to the process rather than an add-on. Siemens-Stiftung provided seed funding to act upon the recommendations and create locally relevant materials. There is a need for lean resources. A key finding from the pilots undertaken in KwaZulu-Natal was that the high color photographs were too expensive to print, and the associated digital images were data heavy and costly to download. Most importantly, images are difficult to understand if they do not map to the actual materials provided. The critical importance of accurate images was highlighted by local research, which concluded that inaccurate or ambiguous images led learners into a learning dead end. Our solution was to find a South African producer of scientific materials, and we worked with graphic designers to take color photos without shadows that exactly duplicated how learners would view experiments and which were scientifically accurate. For instance, if a switch needed to be depressed by a finger, the hand with the finger on the switch was photographed as shown. So then from these detailed and scientifically accurate black and white line drawings were produced that eradicated what Tufte refers to as chart junk or non-informational ink, and which had transparent backgrounds so as to not use ink when printing out, because if it's not transparent, then it starts to print out a slightly grayish color. Despite being high in quality, they were also small in size, so quick and cheap to transmit electronically. Printer ink was kept to a minimum as they could be printed or photocopied on an old black and white machine without losing accuracy. The project produced its own library of scientific symbols to ensure low costs of reproduction or transmission and no issues with intellectual property rights. By such adaptations, we sought to accommodate the lack of equity of access in terms of data, devices, and infrastructure. During the pandemic, however, we switched to online from face-to-face training, which was supported by BMZ and Siemens Stiftung, but struggled with issues of access and high data costs in our remote and rural communities. Solutions were very expensive and difficult to implement. As a result, we worked with partners globally on solving the challenges identified and successfully piloted a Moodlebox project in South Africa, supported by Creative Commons, Siemens Stiftung, and Sabia, and run by the STEAM Foundation. We were able to implement OER content on a free, Libra, and open source learning management system, Moodle, which had been ported to run on a Raspberry Pi, which is literally a credit card sized, inexpensive computer, which in this instance acts then as a portable server that does not require internet access and can operate for days on a charge from a battery pack. This is the Moodlebox. Here's a typical setup of a Moodlebox, which is a Raspberry Pi 4 model in a case with a fan in it to help against overheating. It runs the Moodle LMS and acts as a Wi-Fi hotspot for the classroom and can support up to 30, possibly 40 devices at a time. It uses a screen, keyboard, and mouse just to interface. And we ordered a USB SD and micro SD card reader to facilitate moving from where you download the software and any of your content onto that tiny little card, and then obviously it's easy to pop it then into your to move between. The devices are low cost, locally assembled smartphones, and the power banks catered for periods of no electricity or load shedding, which is no electricity. So the Moodlebox provides a low-cost, zero-data solution that allows asynchronous learning and does not have to be online and plugged in at all times. Here we have Nomvuyo's school. She is principal of Kulisani Child Development Academy, and it is here in Langa Township that we piloted the Moodlebox. Here we can see her students have in their hands the South African assembled smartphones, which literally come in at a 10th of the price, 20th of the price in some cases, of other smartphones. And they are getting ready to read an OER book on their smartphones that are shared between the students. So each student so one smartphone can work with multiple students, and each student has their own profile on the smartphone. And Dan McGuire, we thank very much for all the time that he spent in teaching us how to do that. The joy of using smaller devices also is that they can be securely locked in a safe, and there's also the possibility of making them dumb devices only able to access Wi-Fi, again to counter theft. So in terms of the students are able to read a wide variety of texts in OER, both in English and also isiXhosa, their home language. And while generative AI was used as a first pass translation of other texts, it was evident that we have a problem with large language models and a small corpora of texts in indigenous languages, as there were errors in translation. Having provided, however, a technical solution for all of the different South African challenges that we came across in terms of implementing OER, the question now turns to how much OER is available in South Africa that is aligned to the curriculum and what can be done in order to enable more. So if we look here, in terms of the UNESCO's definition of OER, which is the 4 licenses, and interestingly enough, the Cape Town Declaration maps more to the free cultural works, this Cape Town Declaration on Open Education. But even within the more expanded UNESCO definition, which allows the non-commercial works, we found a paucity of OER, particularly those that were more CC BY or CC BY SA. And the analysis that we did was, what I did was I reanalyzed work that was a data set that resulted from desktop research undertaken by JET Education Services during the pandemic to indicate which digital resources were available to teachers, learners, and parents. And one of the findings of the research is that many online resources exist, but there is a dearth of offline resources. However, when I reanalyzed the data set and post-coded it to indicate whether or not it was aligned to the South African curriculum, whether it was licensed, whether it was copyright, we ended up discovering that there were not that many that were CC licensed. And we also had a lot of duplication of the data since the same organization was repeated through different web pages. So we literally found one organization where the works were duplicated in about 8 different data sets. And so while it looked like there might be 75 resources, it turns out there were only, let's say, 52 once you done the duplication. And the other thing that was really concerning is that in terms of South African copyright law, the copyright symbol is not required for a work to be subject to copyright, nor does it have any legal effect. However, in terms of the Berne Convention, and South Africa is a Berne Convention country, copyright is conferred automatically on qualifying knowledge goods. So an affirmative act is required to give permission beyond statutory exceptions and limitations to use. So basically, this means that if a resource is not openly licensed and you know which organization created it, it is not open. You have to assume that it is copyright, and use of it that is not openly licensed in South Africa is legally tricky. So with this, unless it was CC licensed or openly licensed, you have to assume it is copyright. And there were literally only 2 at the time that were properly and adequately licensed as OER. Since then, the Creative Commons chapter in South Africa, which I'm lead of, has been very active in capacity building within the education sector, the NPO education sector, particularly in K to 12. And we have had a number of have been relicensed, things that were, for instance, ND, which is not OER. So we've had relicensing occurring. And we also, supported by Siemens Stiftung, we went to there's been a lot of work done with the National Association of Social Change Entities in Education, a lot of education, and also we have managed to change the contractual funding agreements, or not we, but through education, a number of funders have gone, oh, there was like a bit of an oversight that everything was automatically copyright. And as a result, now we've had a number of funders change their paradigm where they are now making sure that whatever they fund is now openly an OER. But from a practical perspective, it is evident that OER projects in the K-12 sector may encounter challenges in sourcing sufficient, appropriately licensed OER that are curriculum aligned to build a substantive materials bank that would be useful to national or regional institutions. So what else can we do to address some of the policy and regulatory environmental constraints which do not enable the use of OER? And here, what we have is the need for copyright reform in South Africa. And South African's copyright law was literally, I mean, this is a picture from it. You can see it's Republic of South Africa, and it was literally created in 1970. It's literally an apartheid era legislation that was created in 1978 and predates the internet by a full 5 years. Its exceptions are limited. It does not allow fair use, but fair dealing, and they were drafted for printed materials. And while the current fair dealing provisions can be used for online materials, they're a very bad fit. And despite multiple efforts over many years by numerous people, starting in 2007, the Copyright Amendment Bill has yet to be signed into law. It's gone through Parliament, it's gone through the provinces, it was agreed upon, but it wasn't signed into law before the new government of national unity, and we are afraid, well, we don't really know what's going to go happening. So even though obviously if you do CC license, you then put it into an international law, but the point is that the use of CC licenses may alleviate some of the shortcomings of the current copyright regime in South Africa, but they are merely a patch and not a fix for the problems of the current copyright system, and statutory reform is therefore urgently needed, particularly in relation to exceptions and limitations in copyright, which has a real negative effect on the production of education materials in South Africa, and fair use provisions have hence been proposed for the amended bill. And the research that Anne Waldek-Thill undertook asked the question, can the provision of open educational resources through the Copyright Amendment Bill promote equitable education? And it is evident that there were power relations occurring, there's trade and industry and all kinds of stuff happening within the sector, but that it is evident that amending the Copyright Bill would empower teachers and students to gain critical access to information, and once signed into law will help transform the lives of millions of South Africans who've been denied access to educational resources and those needing accessible formats to obtain information. The application of copyright to educational resources, this was something else I found, that most of the resources created by the Department of Basic Education, they automatically slapped copyright on top of it. It was like an unthinking process. So there was an automatic operation of law imposes an artificial scarcity on the resources. And that, at certain levels, if it's a state resource, it should be public domain. But when it comes to some of your learning and teaching materials, there's a bit of a gray area as to whether or not copyright can or cannot be applied. But for state and philanthropically funded resources, copyright is not part of a business model, but is simply the unintended consequence of copyright law. This unthinking, let's apply copyright. So unlike other limiting factors, reducing the artificial scarcity of critical learning resources due to copyright does not actually require more resources, but simply a change in legal terms. And that is one of the advocacy one of the things that we are doing within Creative Commons South Africa to make sure that people are aware of this. And then the final thing is, if you look at my taxes, my textbook, which is the Cape Town Open Declaration. So under the policy section of the Cape Town Open Declaration of 2008, it states that ideally taxpayer-funded educational resources should be open educational resources. And it is evident that with a simple change to the tax law, which is 18A in South Africa, governing the deductibility of certain donations to suitably accredited organizations undertaking public benefit activities in South Africa, such as educational resources, a catalytic change could occur. And it's something that I've been taking out, and Creative Commons has been taking out again to the K-12, the basic education sector, arguing that it would be good, but there's been a lot of capacity building, a lot of education. I mean, the fact is that in South Africa currently, there are only 4 of us that we know of who have undertaken the Creative Commons sort of certificate for educators. OER is very well known within the universities, but not all universities. UCT, very much so. Some universities, not so much. But that OER hasn't really penetrated within the K-12 environment. But what we are advocating, and that it would be good that we change the law so that if educational materials are provided by either the taxpayer directly or tax deductible donations, which is again the taxpayer, that those books should be OER. So we ask all of you to consider similar ways of engaging with policy in your own countries, that you may be inspired to find and encourage legislative changes that could lead to catalytic transformation in your own teaching and learning context. But we know that this is never overnight, but we wanted to look at specific catalytic actions that, despite seeming to be small, could transform an educational landscape at no further cost to the fiscus through more effective policy around copyright and tax strategy. And this is it. Thank you very much, and thank you for being part of the push and pull of ideas. And now we can open up to the floor. So we are done. Oh, and I do have a list of references under the slide. This is Linda Radebe at KwaXimba, no, KwaXimba School in KwaXimba. Okay, Anne, are there any questions? I'm going to stop sharing.
There are not any questions, but I'm going to make you the host in case there is a conversation that wants to continue.
Alrighty, it's good to see you, Glenda. Thank you for coming in. I see Glenda Cox is in the room. I know that her session was spilling over. I had to leave it, unfortunately, to come in here.
Thanks, Kathryn. Well done. It's great.
Excellent. Are there any questions that anyone has? Please, you can now sort of put on your videos and unmute now that I would like, in this interim, I'd like Nomvuyo and Anne just to put on their videos quickly so that they can say hello, since they were both critical to this. And as I said, Andrew Rens is stuck in surprisingly chaotic Cape Town traffic. So he apologized for not being able to make it to this meeting. Okay, there is Anne. Hello, Anne. And Nomvuyo. Are there no questions? Hello, Nomvuyo. Do you want to have... Nomvuyo is our very special person. She was our chief materials developer. She's the heart of everything that we have done in this project, coming from UCT Schools Development Unit. And also you did the piloting for us in your Kulisani. All of those photos were taken from me when I was down in June. So it was just so exciting to see your classroom equipped with the Moodle box and having a fully successful pilot. So I would love you to just have maybe a short reflection on everything. You need to unmute. Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay.
No problem.
Hi everyone. I think you've said it all, Kathryn, and I think the project is going well. We're still introducing new learners to the model blocks, and they are enjoying it, and it's really it's helping us to actually promote the reading. And the only important, the important thing is that they are reading on their own language, using their own language, which is key, more especially at that level.
Yes, I don't think I introduced you. You're dealing with foundation phase, so you're dealing with real kindergarten and even pre-K. So, so that is where it's really such a critical time in terms of the learning resources being available. And I know that you're using, I think, Story Weaver, and what are the other books that you are using that are available in isiXhosa?
Basically, what is still in the model box is the stories from the South African or Story Weaver book. We are developing now the mathematics quizzes for that level.
That's fabulous. Oh, and I think what I didn't really indicate was that what Dan from Sabia, the whole program was that you also then trained to use Moodle the Moodle box, Moodle as an LMS, so that the kids could do all of the quizzes and the interaction. So even though it's a stripped down form of Moodle with none of the what they call the add-ons, the fact is it's still full Moodle that you're working with. So now you're actually using Moodle in a pre-kindergarten environment, which I think is incredibly exciting.
It is, and for us to have that kind of resource, it's really incredible. And again, for me, maybe the reason why I started at that level, it's because of what I've seen and of what you've mentioned earlier on, that because of the teachers that are teaching at that level, they are generalists, and unfortunately, during their training, they were just given enough to teach the learners at that level, and now it poses a great challenge, more especially now the curriculum is been revised, and now it needs skills to deliver it, which most of them they don't have.
Yeah. Yes. So thank you so much for putting up your hand to run it, because I know when initially Dan came and said, "Are you interested?" I was like, actually, you know what? We can do it with Nomvuyo, because I knew that with you it would be a success and we could use it then as a blueprint for elsewhere. So thank you so much. I don't know if there don't seem to be any other questions, and I think we're pretty much at the end of time. I know that they're going to stop recording soon, but we are able to continue and chat if there are any other people who are wanting to be a bit more informal, or we can just then tap out. I guess it will be recorded for posterity. I don't see any hands up. So I guess what I will do is, as a co-host, I should be able to take the recording off and pause recording.